in the air. Teshuva was a trend that became a trickle and expanded into almost a torrent, even though probably at the same time there were more people leaving Orthodox Judaism than joining. But nevertheless, there was a countercurrent of return, and he stoked that fire, and he encouraged it. And he was such an important figure. I mentioned already that I was a kind of colleague of his for a short time, many years ago, before I was married. I just want to read you a few passages from an article that Jonathan Rosenblum wrote in conjunction with his book. I guess it was kind of partly a promotion of his book. He quotes Rabbi Mendel Weinbach, who was the Rosh Yeshiva at Or Sameach, no longer living. If not for Meir Schuster, the Baal Tshuva institutions as we know them today would not exist. And Rabbi Refson, as I mentioned, estimated that at least a third of the 40,000 young women at Neve Yerushalayim. The interesting thing is that Rabbi Yehuda Silver, who we also know well, only spoken in Kesher, but Ruthie and I know him well. I know him from many years ago. He was in high school in Chicago with Meir Schuster. He said he was very shy and withdrawn. He found it almost painfully difficult to communicate or to make connections with people. I said, when Rabbi Silver said, when I came to Israel years later, I was astonished to see that the same shy teenager was now approaching dozens of strangers a day. And he said it's like a transformation. But in fact, it wasn't a transformation. He was still shy. He was still awkward. He still found it difficult to strike up a conversation. But he moved himself to do it out of love, out of caring for his fellow Jew. So that is a remarkable thing. It's not because he went to Dale Carnegie's course and how to win friends and influence people.
You go to Philip's course on goals?
He didn't even go to Philip's course on goals. Imagine what he could have done if he had been there.
I think he would love
the achievement of Meir Schuster is, Jonathan writes, is deeply intertwined with the historical moment. The late 60s and 70s may have bequeathed to us many pernicious legacies in terms of drug use and the breakdown of traditional morals, but the generation's pursuit of authenticity and quest for experience sent tens of thousands of young Jews on a round-the-world journey of self-discovery. And most of those eventually ended up in Jerusalem at some point in the journey. That's quite relevant because nowadays, at least in America, when you graduate university, you're normally saddled with about $50,000 to $100,000 of debt. And the idea of taking off a year to go around the world costs you another 10 or 15K before you look for a first job. It's just, for most people, it's not achievable and certainly not not the norm. But that was an earlier time, a time when that was not the case, and a time when the idea of discovering the world and self-discovery was before the internet era where you can visit Machu Picchu from the comfort of your sofa. It wasn't like that. If you wanted to go, you need to actually be there. And that openness to possibility characterized the generation. Here's, for me, one of the most important short citations of this article. Rabbi Meir Schuster didn't see externals, only this Jewish soul inside. And his wife, Esther Schuster, put it best. He saw through them and they saw through him. Where others might just see long hair, a scraggly beard, and bedraggled clothes of young adults exploring their identity, Rabbi Schuster saw nothing besides Hashem's beloved child, the pure, unsullied Pintele Yid, the spark of a Jew standing before him. Whereas an outside observer might see a gangly, decidedly uncool, inarticulate figure, thousands of young Jews saw someone who wanted what was best for them more than they did for themselves. Young Jews trusted and followed the awkward stranger to a degree they had never trusted anyone before. I heard many years ago a story of a young girl, an American, maybe a backpacker or probably a university graduate, and she went to the Kotel, and Meir Schuster approached her and asked her, is she interested in going to a class in seminary, meaning a great rabbi or a great woman? And she said, no, I'm going to kibbutz. He tried to importune her. She said, no. He said, what kibbutz are you going to? So she said the name of some kibbutz, I'm sure a not religious kibbutz. Anyway, she went to the kibbutz. A week later, she gets a postcard from Rabbi Meir Schuster. How are you? How is the kibbutz? How is Israel? Remember, you'd like to go to a class in seminary. Let me know. Anyway, threw the postcard away. Then she had told him she's going to kibbutz for a month or something like that, and he figured probably should go to Eilat. So he said to some other kids going to Eilat, if you see a girl, her name is Robin, and she's from wherever it is, give her regards from Rabbi Schuster. Sure enough, they meet this girl. They're in a hostel somewhere in Eilat, and they say, "Yeah, are you Robin? Yeah, I'm from this town. Oh, we've got regards from you, Rabbi Schuster." This girl decided, you know what? I'm going to go to seminary after. So she went to Neve and they asked her, how did you get here? What brought you here? So she said, Rabbi Meir Schuster. So they said to her, what made you, respond to the urging of this rabbi? She said, you know what? No one ever before had the same care for me, the same love, the same concern, the same belief in me and what I could achieve. I thought he doesn't want me for my money, doesn't want me for my body, doesn't want me for my connections, or he wants a favor from me. He only wants something that's good for me. She said, that is a rarity. I think that that's such an important ingredient. His awkwardness and the fact that he was not the Don Juan type of personality, it actually had the effect of reassuring these young people, especially the women. One of the people who was sort of in the same field, in the outreach field, said, I used to see him. He would meet a girl or a guy, and he would grab her suitcase and run off, and they would be sort of jogging behind him. And the guy, this rabbi said, I used to think to myself, speak to them, talk to them, have a relationship with them. But that wasn't him. He was about action, and somehow that simplicity and yet that deep concern inspired so many of these young people, and they followed him. They followed him into the unknown. Jonathan mentions the quality of chen. Chen means charm or grace. It's a Hebrew word, a beautiful biblical Hebrew word like sheker hachen, beheva hayofi, which is not easy to translate into English. It refers to some quality which evokes affection and respect and devotion and affinity in people. So Rabbi Rosenblum writes that chen is always described in the Torah as a form of divine gift. The word chinam. Chinam means for free. Chen, Noach matzah chen. Despite his awkwardness, or even because of his awkwardness, Rabbi Schuster found chen with countless young people. Every young woman who arrived with Rabbi Schuster to Neve Yerushalayim always said the same thing. Remembers Rabbi Eliezer Liff, who was the director of the Beginners Program for many years. I would never get into a car with a strange man, and yet they did. The fact that there was nothing glib about his speech, that he always raced ahead, helped the young women trust him. Just a couple of more brief citations, and then I'll tell you my own thoughts. When philanthropist Dov Friedberg from Toronto decided to purchase the Heritage House Women's Hostel, what attracted him to Rabbi Schuster was the total absence of the word I in his conversations. Phrases such as, I made him frum, were utterly foreign to him. He never spoke of his achievements, and nothing could induce him to do so. Like we saw in the film, where the man who hosted him once, a week for 20 years, he asked him, how many people, he refused to even say, just about extracted from him a figure that was probably a fraction of the real number. Somebody said, and this I remember as well, because as I told you, I hung out at the Kotel one summer. I used to see Rabbi Schuster daven. He davened like a child, with the enthusiasm, with the excitement. He would his hands sometimes in his tefillah like in kind of ecstasy. Somebody observed, I learned two things watching him daven. He continued, there is a God in the world, and this fellow knows him well. He never permitted himself a vacation day over a span of a quarter century. Even on Yom Kippur, he davened at sunrise so he wouldn't miss the curious tourists later on. Imagine, on Yom Kippur, he would get up at probably 4:30 a.m. to finish his prayers by about noon, so that he could go to the hotel to stand in the blazing heat and fasting, because there will be tourists and others there on Yom Kippur, so as not to miss that opportunity. I want to tell you some of my own thoughts, with your permission, and since you've got nowhere to go for the next 25 minutes anyway, my reflections, my personal thoughts about the Meir Schuster within each of us. I remember Rabbi Schuster began his kotel career in 1972. In 1978, a young boy called Rashi Simon rocked up in yeshiva, not with the kotel. I went to yeshiva. I wasn't the Meir Schuster protege, but I went to yeshiva in 1978 and in Yerushalayim. And I remember in the tea room, which was a place where they had like a drink, tea or coffee or something like that. If you get tired, thirsty during learning. So they had, it was like a rec room sort of, it wasn't supposed to be a recreation room, but anyway, some of the more errant boys, probably myself among them, used to turn it into that. So they had things on the walls, the interesting things to read. And I remember reading a little article about this man, Rabbi Meir Schuster, who asked a question to Rabbi Yashev. The question was, Rabbi Schuster, was sending these young people, kids, boys and girls, American, probably some Brits as well, or some from elsewhere in the world, to religious neighborhoods, to Mattersdorf, to Kiryat Sanz, to those who know the neighborhoods in Jerusalem, to Shari Chesed, to Mea Sha'arim. And he was sending them for Friday night meals all the time in large numbers. And most of course, the summertime was the main time for this. And the boys were in shorts, the girls were in shorts, and even less on top. And the residents in these neighborhoods thought it's unseemly that this rabbi is sending us. I mean, they were families, so of course we're prepared to welcome them. But the neighbors of the families, thought it's not right. And they told the neighbors having these guests, you shouldn't be welcoming into our neighborhoods, into our apartment building, these kinds of people. So Rabbi Meir Schuster asked Rabbi Yashev, he said, should I do it or should I give it up? Should I continue? Rabbi Yashev told me you should continue. He said, tell the neighbors, they don't have to look. And that's what Rabbi Yashev said, that the opportunity, the possibility, which is a chance, I won't say it's a chance that will never return. Who knows what could otherwise be, but it's an opportune chance to introduce these young people to the possibility of a religious experience. Like we heard from somebody, by the way, Ruth and I, I'm sure, enjoyed seeing our friend Shlomo Goldberg. We know the Goldbergs very well, Steve Goldberg, and others, who were so much part of that experience, and for whom that was such an important part of their lives. About 10 years ago, possibly a bit more, Lady Jacobovitz had passed away. Some of you, I'm sure, remember her, Lady J. I went to her funeral, and one of the speakers, it was either one of her sons or son-in-law, I can't remember which one, said the following at the funeral of Lady Jacobovitz. We knew the Jacobovitzes very well. In fact, they're still on our Kesher stationery, not the use of stationery anymore, because of the email, but they were the founding patrons of Kesher many years ago. And at her funeral, he said, one of the sons-in-law said that Rabbi Jacobovitz, my father, I forget which one, had a brilliant mind. He was a great Talmid Chacham. He had the gift of communication. He had he was of unwavering principles. He had a lot of gifts that not everybody has. Not everybody had his learning or his learning opportunities or his mind. He said, but my mother, what were her outstanding talents, her gifts? What is she remembered for? You speak to Ruthie afterwards, she can tell you many examples of this. He said, my mother's greatness were things that we can all do. She would call people before Yom Tov to wish them good Yom Tov, and not just 3 or 4, maybe 300 or 400. She would probably start, middle of Elul to start calling people.
Who would she call? And I thought it was, it felt so special. She didn't say I have to
she would call men and women who are on their own, a woman who is widowed, a person who is divorced, a person who had gone through a difficult time, a woman who just gave birth, a woman maybe suffering from some depression for whatever the reason.
For good reasons also. But she had her list
of people that she would call. She would always write a thank you note. Within days, she would get a handwritten thank you note from her. She would have a smile. She had care and concern for every person. Can we all do those things? Those are not qualities which are gifts from Hashem. Those are things which someone who cares, we can all do it. I'm not saying it's so easy. I mean, certainly my shortcomings in all of those areas illustrates that it's not so easy. But what's my excuse? I don't have a good excuse. Meir Schuster was the same way. For him to even strike up a conversation with a stranger was so difficult. Jonathan Rosen begins his article by saying, Rabbi Schuster was always a mystery to me. He said, I was learning at Or Sameach in the summer of 1979. Jonathan was already married, and they took off a year to go to Israel, and they're still there ever since, 1979. And he said, I was on Meir Schuster's list of families that he would call and say, can you take a guest for Friday night? So he said, on Thursday night, the phone would ring, but when either I or my wife picked it up, there would be silence on the other end. Eventually, I learned to respond, is that you, Rabbi Schuster? As a prelude to the inevitable question, how many can you take for Shabbos night? But what I can never figure out is how someone so shy he could not initiate a phone conversation with someone he knew well could force himself to approach dozens of complete strangers every single day. Rabbi Schuster demonstrates something that we can all do. If he could do it, surely we can do it as well. He was shy. I said he was uncool. He had a charisma deficit. And although I'm sure he was a lamdan, he learned in fine yeshivas, and I'm sure he got his smicha, but his accomplishments did not draw on his knowledge of Talmud or Shulchan Aruch. His accomplishments were the consequence of his love of his fellow Jew. There was a great Hasidic master called Apter Rav, Avram Yeshua Heschel. He was known as the Ohed Yisrael. He wrote a book by that name. One year, the Baal Tokeya, the one who used to blow shofar, either he moved away or he passed away. And there's another man who was very gifted, very talented with blowing the shofar, an Erlich Yid, very God-fearing and a very fine, upstanding member of the community, was going to be the new Baal Tokeya. So he was quaking with fear. How will he be worthy of blowing the shofar for the Aptarov, for all the tzibah, the whole community, blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah morning, the day of judgment, when they all stand, the whole Jewish people stands before the throne of God in judgment, that we're relying on the shofar, the notes of the shofar. So already after Pesach, he said to the Rav, please tell me, learn with me, teach me, reveal to me the sod, the secret of Tekiyah Shofar. Of course, not how to do it, but the deeper meaning so that I can have the right intention. And the Rav said, maybe later, we'll find another time. It's not the right season for it. And then we put him off. It was evident to the man that the Rav maybe thought he's not up to it. The secret is too profound for him to grasp. Finally, importuned him in the middle of Elul. He said, look, you must tell me, Rabbi. He said, okay, I'll tell you. The soul of Tekiyah Shofar is Ahavas Yisrael, love of your fellow Jew. So the man said, is that all? The Rav said, I told you weren't ready. Ahavas Yisrael, the love of a fellow Jew, the ability to see completely beyond the facade, to see beyond the habits or the characteristics of that person, and to see the unsullied, the soul within, the spark within. And as Esther Schuster said, they saw through him, meaning that they saw that there's something beyond just the appearance of the beard and the tie and the hat. It's so out of place, and the cocktail in the summer afternoons. And they saw through him, they saw that there's something that motivates this man. There's something great. And he saw through them, he saw within their soul. That is the key to the success, ultimately, of Meir Schuster. And I think this is really the Meir Schuster within each of us. Also, as any person in sales will tell you, the key to success involves believing in your product. If you believe in the efficacy of your product, in the integrity of your product, then you can sell it with total conviction. And of course, that was true for Meir Schuster as well. He had no ego. His motivation was entirely and exclusively for the benefit of the other person. He didn't think about how many people have I influenced, how many have I encouraged, what accomplishments I have to my credit. Nothing of that. It was no quest for the accolades or recognition of neighbors, of relatives. And therefore, I say that this is something that we have to access as well. The Meir Schuster within each of us. And I say Meir Schuster not to take away his smicha, but as I said a moment before, to indicate that what he accomplished was not due to his years in yeshiva per se. I'm sure he was inspired by that, but it's something that we can all also emulate in our own way, whether it's neighbors, co-workers, relatives, even members of our own family. We have to see the opportunity and the greatness, the potential within every Jew. And don't be shy, whether you invite someone for a Shabbos meal or to come to shul, whether you come to Kesher, or wherever it may be, or to a shiur, or to introduce him to a rabbi or someone who can possibly answer that person's questions. If one person, Meir Schuster, could influence tens of thousands, then surely tens of thousands can influence one or a handful. I'd just like to end, and we have about 10 minutes till Mariv, but I'd like to end with a thought about the kotel itself. Of course, it's not a coincidence or just a happenstance that he was the man at the wall. If he had been the man at the Central Bus Station or Tel Aviv Beach, I don't know whether his success record would have been quite the same. There is something about the kotel. I'd like to just conclude, because it is Tisha B'Av, now the waning minutes of Tisha B'Av, with a thought about the kotel itself. The word kotel can be divided into the letters Chaf Vav and tail. Tail, not like a tall tale, but a tail is like a ruin. Like we say, V'nivnasa ir al tilah, that the city of Jerusalem will be rebuilt on its ruin. It's a word that you find, it's even in English, it comes from the Hebrew, but in English, a tale like Tel El Amarna, or any of these ancient cities that are excavated, they call it a tell, because over the centuries, the kind of mound, the heap develops, where each generation or each successive occasion where the city is sacked or burnt down, they rebuild it. Tale, therefore, alludes to what was the desolation. But the Chaf Vav, of course, is the gematria of the Shem Hashem, the name of God. The kotel is that place where the Shekhinah is still hovering, where the Shekhinah is still perceptible, where people are drawn from all over the world to visit that place where they can encounter the divine, even as they see just the remnant, just the remains of the Beis Hamikdash which stood there. And it is my hope and expectation that in the merit of the work of Meir Schuster and the merit of each of us if we can contribute ourselves, whether to reaching out to others or, my friends, even reaching out to ourselves, that we can transform the character of Tisha B'Av, which recalls the destruction, to a time of restoration when the ko and the tel, with the name of Hashem and the remnant of the Beis Hamikdash, will be completely reunited, and the Beis Hamikdash itself will be rebuilt. Amen.
Amen. Wow.
Thank you again to everyone. We do have a few more minutes. I'm happy to hear from you. I've done quite a lot of talking. We've all enjoyed the film. I'm sure it stimulated some thoughts. Please say yeah.
Other children, he tragically lost a daughter.
It seems he did. He did. That was his eldest child. She was killed in a run over by a truck the day after Pesach in 1976, I think it says, and 1975, on Isukad of Pesach. But it says here the Schuster's oldest child. So it seems he did have does have other children, and whether they've carried on his work, I don't think so. Possibly they've gone into more normative.
I'm sure
fields.
Everyone in their own way. We don't have to necessarily.
I'm sure you're right. Yeah, I'm sure you're right. At least in the way that I was just saying now, the last few minutes, I'm sure that they have. No doubt that they have. But I said earlier, actually, when we began, I said that there were others who kind of got into the spirit of things. And I was sort of apprentice to one of his imitators. We used to do tours, as I said, in Meir Sharim and elsewhere. We did 2 nights. We did Friday night, late Friday night, and then we did one of the other nights of the week. We did the Old City. We did the tours of the Meir Sharim as well. And
Rabbi, can I add something?
Sure.
I also knew him, and I actually had some experiences with him when I lived in Israel. But I think outreach in that way is not the same today. And I think what we all need to do is to, as you said, be the Rabbi Schuster within each of us to inspire ourselves. And if we illuminate ourselves and the neshama within ourselves, that is going to shine forward to people. And we have another concept that truth advertises itself, right? We will have an effect on people because we will feel so positively about our own Judaism. So I think that's the way.
Absolutely.
The way to go as
Absolutely.
well.
His authenticity was transparent. I said in his prayer and in the way he interacted with people, which was with no ego, with no quest for accolades or acknowledgement. He was that kind of completely genuine personality. And again, even if he sets a standard that is not easy to replicate, but surely we can follow in his footsteps, each person in his own way.
We can start with bringing people to Kesher.
He mostly sent to those 2 institutions, Esha Torah, which was right nearby, and Or Sameach, and for the women to Neve Yerushalayim. I mean, on the one hand, he benefited them. He sent them students who otherwise probably would. I mean, Jonathan writes that of those that he sent, of course, many of them, probably most of them, did not stay. They went for a lesson or a day or something, but enough of them stayed that the dormitory was always full. So on the one hand, he was feeding them, but on the other hand, most of the people he sent them, they didn't pay a dime. They only went because it was free. So the yeshiva, I mean, we heard from Seth Mandel, but I also know that Rabbi Schiller told him that if your problem is your ticket, you don't want to lose your ticket to go join the Peace Corps, to go to Senegal, there's not a problem, we'll get you another ticket. So the yeshivas benefited from Schuster, but it cost them a small fortune in looking after all of his freeloaders
Also, in those days,
he sent them.
those were the main institutions that we've been to, still today. And then there was also a Spanish speaking program that opened up in different yeshivas and Osmath and Neve. And they decided to open up a heritage house, which was one of these free hostels for Spanish speakers, so that they would be able to get students into them as well.
I think it's interesting. That Spanish-speaking heritage house. So the man who wanted to start it approached I'm from Edelstein, who was associated with Meir Schuster, and he said, I'd like to do a Spanish-speaking heritage house. I will do the fundraising, I'll do the recruiting and all of that, but I'd like to do Spanish heritage. So he said, if you're going to do all the work and take all the risk, then why do you need to be associated with Rabbi Schuster? So he said, because I would like to be a beneficiary of the divine beneficence that seems to accompany him. So even though I'll do all the work myself, but if I'm associated with him, then his, Midas touch will help us as well. There was a kind of recognition among his peers and his contemporaries, Meir Schuster, that he was a very special man. And he had, as I say, unpretentious roots and unpretentious character, but total dedication, total devotion, total L'Shem Shamayim, completely, as I say, without affectation and without any kind of personal agenda. And it was that which made him such a compelling figure. I think we can just about dive in now.